only a handful of states have moved to legalize recreational marijuana. Will New Jersey take that step, Governor Codey? What's the status at this point?
Well, it's up in the air right now. I think in the next 4 to 6 months, you'll probably see a vote, as long as they have the votes. We're not sure about that. And you know, there's some people like myself, I don't like the recreational, the medical marijuana is fine with me. If you want to decriminalize it, fine with me. So it's going to be interesting, because it's been talked about for a good 2 or 3 years now, and never put up for a vote because the votes necessarily weren't there. But now we have a governor who clearly is in favor of it. But there's other issues, and Don can talk to them as well as I can.
So obviously there are still issues to be resolved. As you indicated, Governor Murphy campaigned on this issue of legalizing recreational marijuana. So the process, Governor DiFrancesco, appears to be more complicated than originally thought. So what are the challenges that you see?
Well, on the one hand, you know, you can do a poll, and most people, I guess the majority of people say it's okay, right? But then it's just that same majority of people, if you started asking them questions, they would probably disagree on a lot of the issues. For example, are you going to let municipalities opt out of this issue? Or, you know, are you going to preempt them? Are you going to have prosecutors and law and police chiefs calling their legislators saying, "Don't vote for this. We don't think this is a good idea"?
That's already happened.
As they said, that there's a lot of, Governor Codey said, there's a lot of, we already have these issues with alcohol. We're going to have the same issues with marijuana in many cases. You know, how do you redefine statutorily driving under the influence of marijuana or other drugs? So it's very complicated. And what about the tax? Do they agree on the tax? And I don't even think they agree on that.
Well, that is an issue, because the governor would like a larger tax than the Senate President, Steve Sweeney, says that he wants.
And who's going to regulate it? And who's going to do the regulation? And you know, that's going to be an issue too.
That you have to create.
It's going to be an issue too.
So
and then should the towns be allowed to say, you're not allowed to sell marijuana in my town?
Well, that's an interesting point. I want to talk about the tax issue, but you've jumped ahead to the towns, and a whole group of towns have already said, about 40 or so, that they will not allow it in their town. So how does this impact what New Jersey is attempting to do through legislative action?
Well, it impacts it a lot. And what's going to happen when these towns say no, and something goes to court to say, I have the right, it's legal. It's my right as a citizen to sell this. And the town says, not in my town.
But you raised the tax issue, Governor DiFrancesco, and of course this governor wants to collect a higher tax than right now the Senate President is willing to do, Steve Sweeney. So how does that impact New Jersey's need to raise revenue? Where's that going to wind up on this issue?
Well, certainly they need every bit of revenue they can find for these budgets lately. I think it always comes down to what's the reasonableness of the tax. I mean, you know, when I was there, we raised the cigarette tax, I don't know how many times in 26 years. It got to be ridiculous, and yet still people are still buying them. So it's, are we passing this legislation to raise money? Or are we passing this legislation because it's a better thing, right thing to do?
I don't think we're doing it for money. And you should never do anything for money in terms of a decision like this. This is a serious decision, and money should not play a role in that tax. And whatever tax is agreed upon, I think will be reasonable, and I think they'll reach a compromise on that issue.
Let me ask you about State Senator Ron Rice, who has proposed that marijuana should be decriminalized, not legalized, small amounts of marijuana. Is that gaining any traction? Have you seen in Trenton?
On that issue, I am 100% with Senator Rice. I agree with him, and he feels very strongly about it, and feels in terms of minority participation in the selling of marijuana that they've been discriminated against and the use of. So if you decriminalize it, you do away with that issue of so many imprisonments of so many young African-American males.
These should be petty disorderly persons violations. They should not be criminal offenses. I mean, you don't want to tie up courts for this kind of issue if you are not going to legalize it.
Thank you very much, Governors, for sharing your perspective on this very important issue still to be resolved in New Jersey.